everyone, good morning and welcome back to Sports Today. We bring you this video every single day to help you catch up on things that have taken place in the world of sport that, well, might have taken place when you and I and the entire world really was catching up on some all important sleep. Because let's face it, was you and I may need sleep, the world of sport doesn't really sleep. There's always something or the other going on. And it can be a little tough to keep a track of every single development that's taking place. But worry not, that's what we are here for at Sports Today. And so let's quickly get into what it is that has been happening. And something that a lot of people may have missed out on yesterday was that in the aftermath of the India versus Oman game in the Asia Cup, Suryakumar Yadav once again actually chose to not mention Pakistan by name. He did, in fact, choose to just focus on the fact that India were prepared for the Super Four. So this is what he actually had to say when he was quizzed about, how it is that India are preparing now for the game coming up and stuff like that. He simply said that no, we're absolutely ready for the Super Four. I think the fact that he chose to then not mention Pakistan seems pretty deliberate here and also speaks to the fact that, I think teams are trying to keep things like obviously there's plenty of facilities already, but there's not going to be any name checking, name calling, or speak about the rivalry. At this point, it wouldn't surprise me if they ended up putting out a graphic on the day before the match where you just mention that it's an India match, then you don't mention who the opponents are, as if that's going to help anything. But it does also speak to the heightened tensions that have been in place for this particular match, thanks to what all has been happening during, the build up to it. It's been 1 week, but this 1 week is felt like a decade. And it's felt like there's been so many little developments we've been tracking on a daily basis. Anyhow, speaking of the match against Oman, there was an unfortunate injury scare for Axar Patel. The all-rounder ended up going off the field after bowling just one over because he ended up hitting his head. And that is a bit of a concern, obviously, considering that he didn't really come back to the field thereafter. But in the post-match press conference, the fielding coach Steve Dilip said that there's nothing to worry about there. He's doing fine. He ended up going off as a precautionary measure. So that's good news when you consider the fact that Akshar is a very key player in this 11. His bowling is very important. His batting also, he can be something of a floater. His batting is really improved. Also, an excellent fielder, very good outfield catcher. So he would be one of those players you would not want injured, especially going into the key phases of the tournament now where the Super Fours, it's pretty much every match must win. And obviously, India are favorites, but you'd want your best players fit. Interesting, another thing happening, by the way, there's a lot of talk, of course, about Suryakumar Yadav and his decision to not bat. He joked it off and said that, I'll try coming higher than number 11 next time. But it is something that has divided a lot of opinions among many people. And in fact, one of the people who defended it or said that, you can understand the thought process was Sunil Gavaskar. He was speaking to the host broadcaster and he said that, I understand why it is this guy did this. He's sometimes a bit of an unorthodox thinker. And this is just an instance of that. It worked out in the end. However, one person who ended up disagreeing with him, although not on the same broadcast, was Sunil Gavaskar's own son, Rohan Gavaskar, who, when speaking to another platform in Crickbuzz, said that, he didn't understand Sky's thinking of choosing to not bat in this particular game at all. He's saying that if the thought process was that you don't want to bat at all and you want to give everyone else a chance, then you may as well sack yourself out from the playing 11 and give it Rinku Singh a go in the team. Then at least that way, Rinku would have gotten some proper game time, and it wouldn't simply be a case of him coming on later on as the subfielder. Remember, Rinku came on as a subfielder, took 2 catches, but then that's pretty much been the extent of his involvement in this particular tournament. So it is, as I said, this entire Sky thing is dividing. I mean, you'd heard all of us, me and Siddharth, speak yesterday about why we thought this was basically a lucky escape. But it's good to see that this is dividing opinions among even other people as well, including, as in this case, families. Another very interesting thing that came out from yesterday's match, we saw Suryakumar Yadav and some Indian players go over and speak to the Oman players after the match, give them a bit of a pep talk. And it was something that Oman skipper Jatinder Singh was very, very happy about. He said afterwards that it was very nice to get that pep talk from them. But he also ended up making a very interesting request to the BCCI and the Indian cricketers as a whole. He said that it would be really nice if the BCCI could somehow open up the access a little bit to the NCA, the National Cricket Academy, so that we could come train there with good facilities and also potentially play some T20 games against Indian club sides and also potentially domestic teams. Now, whether or not that is something that could happen, that's a whole different thing. But it's a very interesting, let's say it was a very interesting statement that was made and a very interesting request because I don't think it's something that BCCI would do, but it would certainly something. I mean, it's a case of shoot your shot. If you don't ask, the answer is always going to be no, right? Anyways, moving on from the world of cricket to the world beyond that. So, in some interesting football news, yesterday we saw that the AIFF had been given the all clear by the Supreme Court to ratify the new constitution and then potentially be able to take Indian football forward without much hesitation. Now, what another interesting thing about learning about the draft constitution, and this is coming out in bits and pieces as more and more information is becoming publicly available on what it could look like. So the new AIFF constitution, very interestingly, is set to give 15 prominent ex-players voting rights on all interesting decisions. And I think that's an excellent call because for too long we've complained about the fact that our sports bodies aren't run by sportsmen. And in keeping with that, the current constitution also debars active politicians, MLAs, MPs from taking up positions of power in the AIFF. So that's a good call because I think the All India Football Federation has seen a lot of political interference, whether willfully or otherwise, over the years. And I think it will be nice to have people whose sole focus is the benefit or the goodness of Indian football, as opposed to some politician who's trying to just hold on to a sports federation to hold on to a little bit more power. Speaking of football, there's two very interesting Premier League matches coming up today. One, of course, being the early kickoff, which is the Merseyside derby between Liverpool and Everton. Now, obviously, Liverpool have made a very good start to the season, although they've had to rely a lot on some very late wins. I think pretty much every game that's been true, whether in the Premier League or even in their opening Champions League game against Atletico Madrid, they've really left things very, very late. But Everton have also been a decent team, really. They've been a team in good form, and especially they look reinvigorated with the presence of Jack Grealish and Keenan Dewsbury Hall in that side. They've looked much better. This should be a very interesting game. Normally, Merseyside derbies can become slightly feisty affairs, so I think we're in for a good match here. And another very interesting match coming up. This is the late kickoff in the Premier League. Is a old rivalry match of South between Manchester United and Chelsea. Now, obviously, this is a match that doesn't quite assume the same significance as it would have, say, a decade prior when both teams were consistently fighting for the Premier League. In fact, they were more often than not in competition for the Premier League. Of course, United finished 15th last season. Chelsea ended up getting a fourth place finish, but it's still a match between two teams whose name really attracts a lot of interest because again, these are two teams who have widely supported fan bases. And it's a match that tends to always deliver and deliver well. Remember that a couple of seasons back, this same match, there was a crazy 4-3 finish when the United were leading 3-2, with like 2 minutes of stoppage time to play. Chelsea ended up winning that match. So even in recent times when the stakes haven't been as high, there's been some good matches. Interesting thing to watch out would be whether or not former United boy Alejandro Garnacho gets the start for Chelsea. Maresca hinted that he is ready for a start. So that'll be very interesting to see if Garnacho gets a game here or not. Switching focus once again, couple more other sports before we wrap up this edition of the Wrap. We were talking yesterday, and there's a preview up on the channel for the F1 race that is set to take place at Azerbaijan. The Azerbaijan Grand Prix taking place in the streets of Baku. I did mention that the McLarens would be favorites in that particular case, but unfortunately, I think I jumped the gun a little bit because basis pre-practice 1 and 2, it seems that the field are closer bunched together than we actually thought. Now, of course, some of that might be down to the fact that in pre-practice 2, both the McLarens ended up suffering a crash. Norris went into the wall. Piastri picked up a little bit of damage. And the Ferraris ended up looking much stronger in the second practice. Lewis Hamilton was, of course, topping practice. Charles Leclerc behind him. Third and fourth were the Mercedes drivers of George Russell and Kimi Antonelli. So it does seem like we're in for a closer race. Don't count out Red Bull and Max Verstappen. Remember, Verstappen pushed for some interesting, extreme, let's say, setup choices at Monza, and that ended up leading him to a victory. So I think we're in for a bit of a fast race or a quick race. Interesting one this time as well. Last bit of news for those of you tracking the world of tennis. The Laver Cup has gotten underway. The battle between Team Europe and Team USA. And after the first day, it is in fact Team Europe who have the advantage, thanks of course to victories for Casper Ruud and Mensik. So they're up 2-0, and that's interesting when you consider that Carlos Alcaraz is yet to actually play a match for Team Europe. So the fact that they are, in a good position in that sense. Very, very interesting. Root got Europe off the mark with a 6-4, 7-6 win over Riley of Elka. Then Mensik ended up beating Michelson 6-1, 6-7, 10-8. That was a very close match, but stay tuned. We'll bring you more updates from there as well. And of course, from the world of sport, plenty said to happen today. So stay tuned. Thank you very much for joining us for this wrap, as always. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget like, share, subscribe, tap the bell, leave us a comment. Follow us across social media. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Don't forget, download the Sports app. Stay tuned to Sports Today for more such updates from the world of sport. Now, from my side, it is goodbye.